Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Melissa Davlin. I'm Vice President of the Idaho Press Club. Our current president is hopefully enjoying the beginning of her retirement on a ski slope right now. So you're stuck with me. I want to thank Governor Brad Little for joining us this morning. As a reminder, the governor is going to speak and answer questions on the record between 9 and just before 10 a.m. We'll take a very short break, and then legislative leadership will join us from 10:05 to 11:05. This, as another reminder, this is questions today from members of the media. Also, when you're recognized for a question, please wait until I get this microphone to you, because we have people who are joining us via Idaho in session, and we want to make sure that they hear your excellent questions. With that, I will turn it over to Governor Little for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Melissa. For those of you that don't know, this is a reapportionment year, and I see you reapportion the press also. There's a lot of people that aren't here, and there's some new people, so welcome. We're gonna, obviously, I've got a little speech tomorrow and then Monday, and there's gonna be quite a bit in there, but it shouldn't be, most of you that know me, it shouldn't be a surprise. Probably the tenor and the priorities of some of the decision units will be a little bit different. 4 years ago, those of you that were around remember that my number one thing is I wanted our kids to stay in Idaho, and I see this morning that we've really slowed down. Now we're only the second fastest growing state in the nation instead of the fastest growing state. But our kids are staying here, and that's great. Now what I want is for them to have better opportunities, better jobs, higher incomes, and almost everything in our budget is tied one way or another into that goal. The world's more complicated. Idaho's getting more diverse. Idaho's getting more, life's just more complicated, and that's why education, as it has in the past, will be my priorities that I talk about the next few days is what we're doing on education. Obviously, we've made great strides with my legislative partners in literacy, and COVID was complicated that a little bit, but the data that we get back now is that we're making great progress in that area, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't take our foot off the gas. That means we need to continue to make progress in that area. Behind literacy, it's quality teachers, teacher pay, teacher compensation. I'm very thankful for the good work that the legislature did on health benefits, not only for classified but non-classified staff. We've aggregated a lot of data since then, and we're going to have some work to do there. But I think there's a pretty good consensus about what we do in that area about the benefits to both classified and non-classified. In fact, some districts will tell you that providing insurance for them doubles or triples the pay of some of those people that they're having a hard time keeping. And I did USA Facts put out a document a couple weeks ago, and Idaho still, if you look at the map in Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, Governor Cox just made a big proposal there. Obviously, Oregon and Washington, we've still got work to do from a competitive standpoint for our teachers. If we were in another region of the country, to be a little different, but we really have some challenges here to be competitive, and we'll have some proposals there. Obviously, the follow-on to House Bill 1, whether it be K-12 or in-demand careers, there'll be the work of getting those implemented will be, first and foremost in what we talk about, and our commitment the commitment we made to the people of Idaho when we ran that bill was, was and is still a priority for myself. Uh, as long as we're talking about having kids stay here, if you look at people that are moving here or kids in Idaho that left and are coming back, public safety continues to be a big issue. And so we'll have some pretty significant public safety initiatives that'll be in the budget. And you can't talk about public safety if you don't talk about fentanyl. We started about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, about 8 or 9 months ago, with Operation Esto Perpetua, and we had meetings all around the state. They came to me with a report. Esto Perpetua, at its onset, was just about what do we do to stop the flow of fentanyl. But even the most callous law enforcement, whether it be local or state or federal, there's other things we have to do. First time interdiction, treatment, testing, lab testing. There's a lot of things there. And it really does dovetail well with what we've done in Idaho and the fact that we're the only state where the judicial, legislative, and executive branch all work together on our Behavioral Health Council. So the recommendations of Behavioral Health Council that we had last year, that I was very gratified that the legislature took an interest in, there'll be more of that. But the Behavioral Health Council work also dovetails with what we're doing in law enforcement interdiction in the fentanyl area. We just started our public outreach. We've done quite a bit of pretty sophisticated work about who do we need to impact, and the tragic stories of these kids that took one pill, and that was it had fatal results. That's where we're going to concentrate some of that awareness going forward, and that's a high priority. Every state's struggling with fentanyl. We've got a good plan. We just got to get it implemented and go forward. But the magnitude of the problem can't be understated. It is a huge problem, and I'll talk about that. Obviously, I guess I'll try and interdict the first question. Property taxes and housing affordability will continue to be an issue. I just remind everybody, and most of you in the room know, that what we do on water is property tax relief. What we do on clean water, what we do on sewage systems, what we do on roads, what we do in education, what we do in insurance that a lot of the supplemental levies go for, all of those tend not to get put into the category, but every one of those initiatives lessen some of the needs that your local governmental entities have, which in essence is your property tax. We will continue to do that. I love what we did on public defense because the nice thing about public defense, it went everywhere. Every single county had a public defense expense. The state came in, put that responsibility on their shoulders, and it took that, and some of those things takes a while before they get through the system, before they get through the budget process. So obviously housing values have at a minimum flattened, and in most instances they've gone down. I think the date that the tax commission or that the counties determine your levy is basically what the value was on December 31st. So it's last year's value. So all that quieting of the real estate market will be reflected in the assessed valuations that'll go out later, and I'm sure that the legislature will have a good discussion on that going forward. So, Melissa, I'm ready.
Say that. Well, I'll kick it off. One of the things that you didn't mention was Medicaid expansion, and that's something that a lot of lawmakers have been concerned about with the unexpected costs that were associated with expanding Medicaid, especially post COVID and the national emergency. Do you have any proposals to rein in those costs? And would you, some lawmakers have floated doing away with Medicaid expansion. Is that something that, is that a bill you'd consider signing?
We always, I mean, we don't just, oh, that's fine. I mean, the health and welfare, the Medicaid administrators over there, we're always trying to work with whoever the providers are to try and get that cost down. And a lot of it you have to work with, most of it you have to work with CMS. So we're continuing to ask for waivers. There's a report that's going to come out, and that's what I think you're alluding to. There's a report that's supposed to come out, I think, in January. I think it's supposed to be in January that's going to talk about that. But we're trying to get, we're cost containment in Medicaid is nothing new. It's been going on forever. The way the federal government did the reimbursement kind of lessened some of the incentive for us to get that done. That's going to go away, and that's why it's so important. No, my whole issue, because for me, my top priority has and always will be education, is the biggest threat to education is the increasing in the Medicaid budget and the corrections budget. And we've got a lot of initiatives we're doing in corrections. Medicaid's a little more complicated because I got to get a waiver from the federal government when we make changes for reimbursement. But no, we want to get containment, work with the legislature, and work with the department all the time.
Any plans for more tax relief or inflation help for Idahoans?
Always. We've had back-to-back decrease rebates and decreases in income taxes. I anticipate that property taxes will be, and of course, not everybody directly pays property taxes. Everybody does indirectly. I anticipate that will be, we've got room to do some work there. But like I said, in the property tax area, you got to make it to where it benefits everybody and not just certain taxing districts that fall into a certain category, whether it be taxing districts that are mainly industrial tax, that are resort areas. Property taxes are complicated for good reason, and I'm sure there'll be ample discussions.
Hi, nice to see you again. I have a question regarding executions. As you well know, Josh T. Walsh and IDOC were unable to carry out an execution. Do you know if there are plans to, I suppose, amend the way that Idaho carries out executions this year? And would you be supportive?
I don't know of any. I don't know of any specific. I've heard all the discussions that probably you have. Probably read them that you wrote them. So, but we're still. Capital cases are still around, and they're going to continue around. Procuring, a safe, effective product is much more complicated than it used to be, and I'm sure that's going to continue to be part of the. And I've heard the discussions, and I know some other states are talking about doing that. But there's also, I guess you could call it, new technology that. And that'll probably get tried in some state and get litigated up to the Supreme Court, and then we'll know what's.
Hi, Governor. Can you talk a bit about the advisory question on the ballot this November and how that affected your strategizing this year?
I heard it passed. Just barely. It's interesting because there was one of those after House Bill 1 when Jim Risch was governor. There was actually one after sales tax in 1965. So asking for some sort of approval from the electorate after a big change in tax code is not anything that's radically new.
Governor, thanks for doing this morning and making time for us. I'm sorry about the breakfast. Um,
My last one.
yeah. You mentioned the follow-up from House Bill 1 is going to be first and foremost on your mind. At the same time, you have 39 first-time lawmakers that
You first-time press members too.
quite a
so,
few first-time press members, and welcome to everybody. But yeah, 39 lawmakers who weren't there September 1st to vote on House Bill 1. How have you engaged with those new legislators and talked to those people in anticipation of the follow-up work, which you described as one of your top priorities for this year?
Well, I've made it a practice ever since I first became lieutenant governor of inviting all the new legislators. It doesn't matter what party, doesn't matter where they're from, but generally it's more of, hi, I'm Brad, and what's important to you, and how can I be helpful? And I've met with them in their districts, I've met with them here, and I've still got a pretty long list, but I'll continue to do that. But I don't know that there's a lot of, I know there was a lot written and talked about that, there was going to be a new legislature in town. But that goes back to the earlier question about, when you get 4 out of 5 voters putting a stamp of approval on it, I think that says something. But I fully recognize that every 2 years there's an entirely new slate of legislators, and that's why it'll be something that'll be a priority for us to continue with the intent of House Bill 1.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kelsey.
The Idaho Housing and Finance Association recently paused its short-term rental assistance program, and they're waiting on a supplemental appropriation that will potentially be coming soon. What's the status of that? Is that going to come in the first couple weeks of the session, and is that something you see as something that has a good chance of passing?
Well, actually, you got a panel coming up here in a minute about how they handle supplementals because of the number of supplementals. Traditionally, the legislature did the supplementals at the very first, but because of some of the other things that have happened, and basically the implementation and the facilitating progress at JFAC, they tagged the supplementals. Some of them they put them into the actual next FY year appropriation. That'll be up to the chairs of the 2 committees about when they handle it. But I know the supplemental is queued up. But that's how they're going to handle it. You can ask the next panel. I give them a little heads up about there.
You mentioned education. I just want to ask, is your focus public education, or are you going to be looking at also some like school choice options as well?
Well, public education, school choice is part of public education, but it goes back to my overarching, I want our kids to stay in Idaho. And they need a good K-12 education, but they also, in this complicated world, they also need more skills, whether it be career technical, whether it be a engineering degree, fill in the blank. And so, and both those were a part of House Bill 1, both K-12 investment and the in-demand careers, whether it be traditional college or a lot of expansion that we're going to do in the CTE area.
Is there anyone who hasn't yet had a chance to ask the question?
Hi, Governor. I wanted to ask you about fentanyl and Operation Esto Perpetua. Last year, you appropriated $1 million from the governor's emergency fund to put toward law enforcement efforts. This morning, you referenced that some of the Behavioral Health Council priorities will be addressed this legislative session. But I'm curious, when it comes to the law enforcement angle, what more does Idaho law enforcement need to combat fentanyl on top of the efforts with media awareness and testing equipment that you've already put forward?
The testing, and we heard this as we went around the state, testing is, and this testing equipment, they cost about $40,000 a piece, and we've got them in every region. and we're making them available to law enforcement there. So obviously, it's this law enforcement. These fentanyl issues are a high priority. So there's gonna be some more resources going to, particularly the state police in that area. On the law enforcement side, on the behavioral health side, I look at substance abuse as kind of there's that first thing you can do is try and convince these kids to never to never do it. But then there's that first time offender. And I think our very first Esto Perpetua meeting in Coeur d'Alene, the chief of police in Coeur d'Alene talked about that first time offender and what can we do for them? Because the earlier, if you can convince them never to do it, that that they're emotionally and mentally and awareness, and then make sure they're prepared, and then intervention that very first time, and then you've got these long-term problems that the Behavioral Health Council has to work on, and also my corrections department. So it's a multifaceted issue, but the money was for state police and awareness. The awareness campaign, I think, just rolled out last week, Emily? Yeah, last week.
And so then when it comes to new funding that'll be proposed, will that be directing toward continuing those testing efforts, or will there be new policy proposals you'll be?
All of the above.
All of the above. Thank you, Governor.
Good morning, Governor. So yesterday at the CEC committee meeting, Director Wolf presented your recommendation of a 10% pay increase for
My
law
secret's
enforcement.
out.
Oh, no. A 10% pay bump for law enforcement officials and 4% for the vast majority of the other rest of the state's workforce. We saw 8.3% inflation in the Mountain West. It's been the highest in the country for a while. With an estimated $1.5 billion surplus, why such the stark difference there?
Well, there's other parts of Lori's report that put some flexibility in there. I was an intern here in 1976 when I was going to college. The first time I'd spent much time in this building, where we implemented the Hay Plan. Phil Batt was a senator, and we implemented the Hay Plan. What Lori presented yesterday is we've kind of backed away from what we did before, and we are making sure that our system is a modern system that compensates our state employees the way they need to be. But there's not I travel all over the state. There's hardly anybody I know that says, being competitive pay is challenging in this market. I think it's starting to dial off a little bit, but when you have full employment, which we do, when you have full employment, there's upward pressure on wages, and that's a good thing. I love the fact that people's wages are going up, but we know we had to address the public safety issue. People need to be safe, and we have to be competitive, and so the public safety issue is the number one priority. The rest of the CEC is more global, but the public safety thing was my number one priority.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a reality that, state troopers can go make more money working for the city or for a county. But when, I guess, the remaining 23,000 workers in the state, as opposed to about 2,400 in law enforcement that I could find, at least on Transparent Idaho, why give them less than what is, coming up with inflation when we have $1.5 million, projected in the
1.5 billion.
billion, excuse me.
What's the difference? Well, because public safety is my highest priority. I've got all these other priorities. I got to make them fit within the box. So.
Governor, the Statesman recently did some polling. We found that 2/3 of Idahoans want the grocery tax repealed. You've said in the past that you would sign a grocery tax repeal bill. Has that changed?
Nope.
Do you expect to see a bill anytime soon?
Well, I also said I wanted to find groceries. Hot chicken, cold chicken, $50 bottle of perfume, fill in the blank. What are groceries? That's the complicated part. That's also what I've always stated is
Let's say it's food staples, meat,
food
can of beans.
staples, WIC or food staples, SNAP.
I think a couple bills last year defined with SNAP, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Would you sign that bill?
If it got to my desk.
Okay, thank you.
So, but here's what I don't want, and the reason is I have been around here a little bit, and when you do that, not that there's anything wrong with lobbyists, but it's full employment for lobbyists about I want to redefine whatever my client has as a grocery under this definition, and that's why I want the definition to be hard and fast to where we don't create. Not that there's anything wrong with lobbyists being fully employed, but it's the uncertainty of what qualifies an exempt. Everyone in here has written about we've got too many exemptions. You don't define that, you're going to create the exemption tsunami of the world. But I'm still for taking the tax off of food.
I have a question from Kevin. Able to speak. We had the House Senate Working Group look at this issue on school facilities based on their work, last year's OPE report, and the challenges facing school districts. Do you think the state needs to play a larger role in paying for facilities?
You've got a big screen on your phone. I'm impressed. Well, we do. We have, and we continue to work on that. And one of the things that we do the most of that we started 10 or 15 years ago is bond levy equalization. And I'm sure there's going to be a discussion about that, about particularly with the elevated interest rate costs. And we've also worked on public safety. We've made money available for public safety. We want and so safety's absolutely the most important priority for these schools. We want them to be safe. And then how do we put something in place that doesn't reward one district where the other district doesn't get any help? That's the whole issue with property taxes.
Is it going to be a priority in your budget proposal?
Part of it. But you'll have to show up Monday to find out what part.
Any other questions right now? I've got plenty. So, as we wait for the abortion ruling from the Idaho Supreme Court, if they do uphold it, you've spoken in the past about wanting to see a little bit more clarity or refinement in the statute that's currently on the books. We know that there have been multiple lawmakers who have already been talking. Have you been part of those talks, and is there something specific that you want to see on your desk if it's upheld?
I have not, but I am aware of the dialogue that's going on, and I agree with most of it. I mean, we've got multiple court challenges that we gotta, so we know what the rules are. We know what what perhaps in our laws have been struck down. What do we want to put back? So I'm very interested in how this is going to go. Everybody knows that I'm pro-life, but I'm also pro-life for the life of the mother. So,
what specifically would you like to see?
I just want to make. I think there's a difference between the intent of some of the legislation and how it's being read, and that's that being read, and that's why we need to get that clarity.
Governor, sticking with abortion, I wondered if you could comment on the GOP convention over the summer, updating its platform to, you could say, remove support for exceptions?
Well, I'm not a fan. I mean, like I said, I've been consistently pro-life, but like I said, I'm also pro-life for the life of the mother.
So following along those same lines, after the U.S. Supreme Court decision, you released a statement that talked about something that stood out to me that you said was that we need to come together to support people that are that may not have access to reproductive health care in the ways that they had before. Are you recommending any additional funding for reproductive health care through our health districts or any other agencies or mechanisms to help folks who might be in a situation where they could have gotten abortion previously but cannot now?
Well, I think, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but it's also young mothers, families, all of those things are being pro-family in every way, shape, or form, supporting them during their pregnancy, after their pregnancy. We've made pretty good progress in foster care. We still got some more things to do there, but that's all being pro-family, and that's part of it. So.
How about transportation? What can we expect to see regarding infrastructure?
More of the same. Well, we made, go talk to the local officials about their local bridges. That I am so thankful for the legislative support for what we're doing in that area, because, this is a fundamental tenet to me, is that we are derelict in our duty if we don't address absolutely critical unfunded maintenance. And I'm very thankful that what's taken place there. And probably the most complicated part of it is the cost of steel and concrete and asphalt and all those other things have gone up so astronomical that when we plugged dollars into it 2 or 3 years ago, what we're getting out of it isn't quite, whether it be ITD or your highway district or your city or county. And so those are, but we need to continue the trajectory of getting our infrastructure current to where we're not saddling the people that come behind us with a bigger problem, particularly from the safety and the commerce side.
Last year, Boise Dev and other outlets had an investigation. Boise Dev uncovered a lot of issues with the construction project south of Cascade. You wrote a pretty terse letter demanding answers. It's been about 6 months now. How's your relationship and your confidence level with?
Well, good. I mean, that project was significantly underbid, but it was also under-engineered. And I think the Boise Dev and the other stories shed some transparency on it. How much money do you spend core drilling before you do a job? Go right up here to Table Rock, where all those houses slid off the hill. They drilled down and they just missed getting down to that slick level of clay that had they drilled a little further, they would have known about it. It was the same thing up there. They didn't know they're going to have to excavate, cut 8 all the way up to the top of the hill when they did that. My issue was with the kind of the transparency part of it, not the fact that, hey, we screwed up, we underbid it, we didn't. That was my issue with it. But I think the message is, and it just wasn't handled very well. And again, my priority is confidence in government. When things like that happen, it shatters people's confidence in government. I got to get these legislators to give me some more transportation money. So.
Over the past few months, the Board of Examiners, which you chair, has kicked several $100,000s in legal bills to JFAC in the legislature over some court settlements. Instead of paying it out of the Constitutional Defense Fund, I believe in a statement to me, you said that you wanted to kind of return back to the original intention of the Constitutional Defense Fund to combat federal overreach. Do you have any sort of initiatives, in the works on the horizon with that? Or
well, when we remember when the Constitutional Defense Fund was first created by the legislature and the governor, the legislature, it was over basically storage of nuclear waste, long-term storage of nuclear waste in Idaho, and we were successful. I would rather play offense with that money than defense. that it not be a default. And that was the settlement that, and the Attorney General's office was pretty, they said that this is what it is. And I just think, it's good for it to come back to the legislature to look at it and say, because they can change the intent of it, but the intent of it was to play offense rather than defense. But nothing in the works right now? No.
Hi, Governor. When it comes to funding for K through 12 schools, there's been, of course, a lot of attention on the advisory vote and on the money that was set aside during the special session. But even before that, there have been conversations about changing the normal school funding formula from a attendance-based system to an enrollment-based system. There's been some moves from the State Board of Education recently to give schools flexibility during COVID. If I'm remembering correctly, you may have even vetoed a bill
I maybe
last
did
year
do that.
that would have made that change. I'm curious if you've had conversations with lawmakers and education stakeholders, and if that conversation is going to move forward that year, whether we're going to see that change implemented.
Well, where we are this year is, I kind of got it during COVID because of and I think most states did that. But I have a firm belief that kids need to be in the classroom, and that matter of fact, I saw yesterday afternoon. I saw one of the administrators of one of the schools in my home district, and we had a good discussion about that. And the evidence is absolutely compelling that particularly the kids that need the help the most need to be in class. And I get the argument about ADA versus enrollment, but because when I go out and talk to employers, they said, we hire these kids and they don't show up. I said, well, we're about ready to put in a system where they don't even have to show up for class. I probably went further than I should have already.
And so then to follow up on that, is it your belief that tying the school's funding to whether students are in the classroom is the right way?
I think we had to have what the state board and I had a discussion on was, okay, this year, but I wanted to come back to the legislature and have the discussion about it, how, and this goes into the whole thing about the school funding formula, but I think kids need to be in class. That's if we can change it to where it's more flexible, more problem, but I don't want to put incentives for the kids that I want to get to read proficiently by the end of the third grade, not being in class.
Thank you.
Wanted to get your reaction to what's going on at North Idaho College with the board and the now interim president and the extended contract that goes into 2024. Understanding that the state, as well as the State Board of Education, have limited power over what to do. I wanted to get your.
We had a stakeholder call 2 days ago, and it was the new president's first day, so my introduction was over a Zoom screen, and he has a lot of things on his plate, and we're there to support him and support the institution, but most importantly, we're there to support those kids. The risk of, the risk to those kids, to their academic standing is first and foremost, and whether it's, but community colleges have a lot of autonomy, and but we want to be there to support those kids.
Is there any other way the state could support those?
Well, we'll see, but it's, they've got to, I think the new president and the board got to get their feet under them, and I'm sure they'll be down here. We'll see them as we always do, and we're also there's going to be, part of that $80 million in demand careers is going to be. They've got a pretty good career technical program that's bolted on to NIC, and they'll be recipients of some of that.
Thank you. Governor, I wanted to ask about education again. You've said it's your top priority. What can you tell us about the newly elected superintendent of public instruction who you've known, who's been a president of your state board of education, and how might the two of you work together to implement either House Bill 1 or teacher pay priorities, or some of the things that you really want to put forward in 2023?
Lots of ways. You know, and all three of the new four of the new constitutional officers, but because education is such a high priority. But Debbie and I have had, even before she announced she was running, I've had lots and lots. She kind of knows where I am, and I kind of know where she is, and we'll continue to work together. We're excited about it. So.
Giving you all my
The-
teacher
you-
look.
You need to give those legislators an extra 20 minutes anyway.
Man, come on, guys. You know,
Am I that boring?
there was a question about the convention earlier, and your thoughts on that proposal. There are other proposals in front of the state party that the officials are going to consider during the winter meeting. I wanted to get your.
Well, I'm I'm pretty focused on tomorrow and Monday and the next. I see the legislative calendar went out with a adjournment date of March something, and 24th. I heartily endorse that. So that means we got a lot of work to do, and I'm focused on that. The only, my issue always is in a constitutional republic, participation, the question about transportation, people need to have confidence. They need to participate and they need to have confidence. And anything the party does, we need to make sure that, we've got a lot of independents in Idaho, that they have some comfort level about who the candidates are going to be, and that's up to the people who are going to show up here and vote this weekend.
You mentioned transportation earlier, bridges, et cetera. I'm wondering, with the recent inflation, I've seen stories from across the country about how not only the bipartisan infrastructure money that's coming into the different states, how inflation is just eating that away, the cost of steel and asphalt that you mentioned earlier. How is Idaho positioned with the inflationary pressures that we're seeing?
Well, compared to the other states, because there's a gun to the head on those federal infrastructure about when that has to be spent. That's the beauty of what the legislature did with giving us a source of revenue for long-term for big projects. Because I've advocated with our congressional delegation, I've advocated with the administration, I advocated when I was chairman of the Western Governors, that those hard deadlines are inflationary by their very nature. If you're making I'll use broadband. If with all the money that's broadband, if we need another facility to make either fiber or conduit or switches or whatever, and that money's going to go away in 2 years, why not just spike the price and not build capacity? That's the wisdom of what we did in Idaho, that we've got long-term funding instead of the short-term funding, which is causing a lot of the inflation. If you're a contractor, you're going to go, I'm going to go out and get a short-term lease on equipment to do these jobs, because I don't know if they're in these other states, because I don't know if there's going to be money there in the future to do bridge projects, et cetera. In Idaho, we can mix that federal money and that infrastructure money with our other money, and the board can be much more prudent. So we're way better shape. And nobody wants to write a story they always talk about the federal. We put more money in Idaho than those federal programs, but then it's up to the board, to the transportation board and the administration over there, to mix and match that money. So our contractors, everybody knows that Idaho's going to be a great place to maintain roads, to build new roads, to do all that other. So we're way better off than those other states, because that's the only lifeline they've got for maintenance is those federal dollars.
Earlier, you also mentioned housing affordability. Were you thinking of addressing that mostly through property tax work, or were there other?
Like, that's a good question. When we put money for affordable housing, I remember the dialogue I was having with Gerald at Idaho Housing and Finance, that we were thinking we could do 1,000 units. And then when interest rates went up, I called him back and I said, what's that going to do? He said, well, we might only be able to do 800. We have done 1,000 units with half the money so far because of the creativity of the contractors, the Idaho Housing and Finance. So we really got a lot of bang for our buck out of that money that was available. The fact that if the biggest impediment to affordable housing right now is mortgage interest rates. And anything we can do to offset that, there's more people out there that can build houses, but the reason they're not building particularly affordable houses because mortgage rates are so high. So anything we can do in that area is going to help with affordable housing, whether it be single family housing or apartments and apartment complexes.
You talked a little bit about your relationship with incoming Superintendent Richfield. Oh, I guess now he's been sworn in. I wanted to ask about your relationship with Attorney General Labrador 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. Of course, you had a pretty contentious primary.
Oh, really? I'd
I
forgotten
do
all
remember
about that.
Yes. Is it water under the bridge? How's your
I
relationship
had a call with
him?
him yesterday about one of the things that the Attorney General's office, the governor's office worked on. I had a very, very good call with him yesterday.
Thanks. Back in November, the state of Idaho sent $1 million to the Moscow Police Department to help with the investigation there. I know we're not able to talk about the suspect and the charges, but can you discuss the decision to send the $1 million to the Moscow Police Department, a little bit about what the need was and how that money may have helped out? And then, is this an unusual situation to help out a local agency in a situation like that?
That was a big issue to me, but the state police were, before we allocated that, they were already doing a lot of work up there with the Moscow City Police, who are the jurisdiction that's in charge, and I'm cognizant that I don't want to start a priority that in every crime in the state, but we do have an obligation. Matter of fact, one of the projects that's a little stalled right now is our new crime lab. But for these complicated cases, state forensics, state lab facility, state investigators are a huge priority. And so I've got a very nice note on my desk from the chief about the assistance that they provided. But this is I hope and pray this is a one-off. We don't have to do anything like this again.
Thank you, Governor. Who's next? We'll go to Ruth.
He just took your job from you.
You mentioned a crime lab that's stalled. You want to tell me about that?
Well, it's just we've got multiple projects that we appropriated a certain amount of money, and as been stated here a couple times, the cost is more. We're going to get it, but it just slowed it down because the bid that we had 2 or 3 years ago is not. And there's going to be a pretty good list of those projects that we wanted to get done for X number. The legislature appropriates the money, and I'm very, very, very cognizant that I don't have that authority. So it may just be authorizing language, whether it be through the permanent building fund or wherever else it is, because everybody knows there's lots of cost overruns. We're going to do it, no question about it.
Yeah, that was my main.
Oh, absolutely.
We're expecting to see a bill banning drag performances in public places within the first probably month of the session. Is that a bill that you would sign?
I haven't seen it. I generally don't comment on theoretical pieces of legislation.
I've got another one from Kevin.
On a bigger screen, good.
Yeah. I learned my lesson. You mentioned school safety previously. The Office of School Safety has struggled to complete on-site safety reviews during the pandemic and hasn't met its goal of reviewing schools on a 3-year cycle. Are you concerned about this?
Yes.
What are you going to do about it?
I know there's a 3-year, and you know, in fairness, you know, that was at DBS in part with the state. That's one of the conversations I'll obviously have with Superintendent Critchfield. How do we get this? And then, you know, there's the safety reviews, and of course they're kept under wraps because we don't want to expose where our soft tissue is in any institution, but we want to make sure that they're being done, and we probably need to continue to review it. You know, what was a risk 10 years ago? You know, 15 years ago, all the risk was fire. And now we've got a lot more risks that we need to assess. So we need to continue to update that and make sure that our schools are absolutely the safest place for our children.
Right. We have time for probably one or two more.
Governor, the legislature can now call itself into session.
I
believe.
heard about that.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're gonna, the Secretary of State's gonna put out a new constitution that's gonna be in it, so. I mean, I prefer that we, and I know my legislative friends also prefer that we get the work done, and but we'll see.
Thank you.
Did you vote for it in November?
I think our time's up. Mine is. I voted against it.
A lot of healthcare workers that we've talked to, and also people who are caring for family members in their homes, have been concerned about Medicaid reimbursement rates for home healthcare workers. Is that on your radar, on your priority list?
That is, the entire time I've been affiliated with the legislative branch, the executive branch, that's been an issue. And now with and it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody, we continue to ramp up the number of particularly primary care doctors and people on the behavioral health side. But there's a lot of initiatives that we're trying to do on healthcare. When you talk about in-demand careers, which is what $80 million of that House Bill 1 is, there's no career that's more in demand than the healthcare side. The state board had convened all the stakeholders and community colleges and asked them, what can we collectively agree on is the biggest need in healthcare workers? And you can't just snap your fingers, write an appropriation bill and get them out the end of the pipeline. And that's everything from CNAs, because I remember during the COVID crisis, you know, there were these long-term care facilities and skilled nursing facilities were just really struggling. So collectively, it'd be good for everybody to say, what do we do to move the needle to make more people available?
All right. I think that's our time, Governor Little.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for doing this.
Good luck, you guys. I softened them up for you.